right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our next session in today's event, a living case study, hiring for a culture of emotional intelligence in the city of Savannah, sponsored by MHS. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credit, so please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. You'll receive an email from hr.com that will include your certification information. During this webcast, we have the chat open for engagement. However, if you have questions for either of the presenters, we ask that you place those questions in the Q&A box in your webinar controls. All right, it is now my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Heather Lee to get us started.
Hello, thank you. And we are delighted to be with you today. This is the second time I've had the pleasure of doing a webinar with HR.com and in partnership with MHS. And today I want to introduce you to my colleague, Jeff Grant, who's the Chief Human Resource Officer with the City of Savannah. I'll let him give you a little bit more background in just a second. This presentation came together because our firm, Developmental Associates, has been working with Jeff across 2 employers for a number of years. And Savannah has really embraced the concept of emotional intelligence. And I thought that it would be really wonderful to showcase what the City of Savannah is doing in this space. And I don't think it matters if you are in the public sector or the private sector, nonprofit, for-profit. I think what matters is the way in which Jeff has led the leadership team in the City of Savannah to really infuse emotional intelligence concepts in multiple areas. And so that's really what the hope is that you see this as a living case study, that Jeff and I are going to take turns presenting on things, but the bulk of this conversation will be Jeff sharing with you the evolution of this journey inside the City of Savannah. So Jeff, what would you like to tell the audience about yourself?
Heather, it's an honor. We've been working at this for some time, and just an honor just to be here, just to share on this topic. And one of the things I truly believe is if you can't see it, you can't manage it. And that's really what today is about, and really about our what we focus on in our theme at the City of Savannah. But definitely a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So our focus today is to give you an overview of the City of Savannah briefly. We'll talk at a very high level about the EQ model Savannah uses and why. And that EQ model is the one that MHS, our sponsor, uses. And then we're going to share some learning culture data with you. And then how Savannah is using emotional intelligence in various areas. And then a discussion about how and why Savannah is working in this direction. So we're going to kick off. I'm going to throw it to Jeff to give you a bit of an overview of the city. So you have a concept. I'm sure we have people from different locations, and not everybody may be familiar with this beautiful place in North America. Jeff, what would you like to tell them about your
Well, Heather, you said it best. City of Savannah, the best city in the world, greatest city in the world, and it is beautiful. We have a population of 147,000, and then we have 2,600 plus employees at the City of Savannah. Our city manager, who is our CEO, is Jade Melder, and then myself, I came in 2018. And my CEO, he came in 2021 with the City of Savannah.
Great, thank you. All right, so just a real high-level overview. I'm imagining that many people here are quite familiar with emotional intelligence, and I use EI and EQ as an abbreviation. Some of you may be more familiar than others, so I thought it would be good to just take a couple moments to talk about this. So our firm specializes in executive selection, but also our grounding is in emotional intelligence. And the reason we believe so strongly in that and we're a bunch of academic nerds that are recovering from academia in terms of we're a combination of political scientists, organizational psychologists, clinical psychologists, school psychologists, et cetera. And what we know from the literature is that IQ obviously is really important, and it gets people into a career band. It helps people get into career choices. But somebody with a high IQ could decide to work in a job that doesn't require that high IQ. And they may get a lot of meaning out of it. And so that's less important to them to have a job that aligns with whatever their IQ might allow them to do. Likewise, people who might have a lower IQ may be capped at one of the things that, some of the things that they could do. And so we know that IQ is what we say is necessary, but not sufficient, especially when you get into leadership, especially when you get into the skills that leaders need. So we always want, IQ gets you into the career band. EI is what helps you advance through the career band. And some things that you can, I won't read slides to you, but you can see the different things here in terms of the differences with IQ and EQ. And we think about this in terms of IQ is knowledge and skills related to how you manage data and things of that nature, verbal information. Whereas EI is understanding emotions, recognizing others, and how you influence. And so both Jeff and I are certified in this. We've also gone through our assessments in this space. And I would say that's a valuable tool. If you haven't already done that and you're listening to us today, watching us, getting an EQ assessment really gives you a deeper understanding of these critical concepts. The model we use is the EQI 2.0. There are a lot of great models that talk about emotional intelligence. And many of you may be familiar with Dan Goleman's model from the book that came out in the early 90s, Primal Leadership. And so there are a lot of different models you can choose from. Developmental Associates chose this particular model because we work in the selection space, and in the United States, there are very strict laws around tests and what kinds of tests you can use in a selection space. And to this day, I believe this is the only one that passes the both reliability and validity test for selection, that it's validated for selection. That I may not be up to date on that, but that is certainly why we have continued using this and have developed this very robust partnership with MHS. You can see in this model that there are 5 composite areas: self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal decision-making, and stress management. And within each of these composites, there are 3 skill areas. Notice I said skill areas. I did not say personality. This is not a personality test. This is something that if you want to choose and develop these skills, you can if you're motivated to do so and disciplined to do so. And then you can see that there is this larger band all the way around called emotional and social functioning or well-being, and that's sort of separate from these 15 skill areas here. So this is the model we use, and we use it again both in selection and professional development. And Jeff is going to talk about those uses within the city of Savannah. So I thought it might be useful so you could see how our use in terms of public servants, and certainly in the city of Savannah, top public servants are optimistic. They exhibit higher self-actualization, self-regard, independence, and assertiveness. And then top senior managers, which could be either public sector or private sector, you'll see there's some overlap there with regard to self-regard and with regard to self-actualization, but there's also happiness, which is now called well-being, interpersonal relations, and reality testing. We don't want to do a deep dive into the concepts of emotional intelligence today or the specific skills here, but we wanted you to understand that these are the characteristics that predict success based on MHS's research, deep research in this space, that these are the characteristics when you measure emotional intelligence that will predict success in these roles. And that's been a part of carrying this out through our work in Developmental Associates and our work specifically in the city of Savannah. So I'm going to turn this over to Jeff and sort of lead off with a question, which is, why did you, Jeff, as the leader in human resources for the city of Savannah, decide that you wanted to use emotional intelligence assessments in executive and leadership hiring? You also are using it in executive coaching and management training. And that decision also required you to convince others around you to
Sure.
do that. So as you lead in and talk about the slide, I teed you up so you can start thinking about how did you get to this place?
Oh, Heather, thank you. No, appreciate it. And I've been in government nearly 20 years in the role that I'm in, two different municipalities. And one of the things that really rang true was I had enough of seeing bad hires, and um, when it comes to, especially at the executive level, there's so much at stake. There's so much risk. And the altitude that executives in which we bring them in at, of course, they're at the highest altitude. They're at the balcony of your organization. And their decisions, their relationships, how they manage stress, how they show up, how they see themselves, those things have an impact on the organization deeply. And Heather, I flew in from Houston last night, and we were 30,000 to 40,000 feet in the air. Those pilots go through rigorous training to fly those planes because they're at such a high altitude, and their decision making has such a tremendous impact on them, on the airline, and on all those people that they're leading. And that's why we embarked on this, because executives are at that level and they have a tremendous impact. And according to the Department of Labor, Department of Labor says that the cost of a bad hire is 30% of somebody's salary, which has like 80% impact on turnover and a 39% impact on a reduction in productivity. And honestly, in my career, I believe it's more than that. Because a lot of times what happens is organizations end up holding on to them, they let them sit in the organization, and it has a deeper impact on individuals. The second reason we really got into it was, experience does not predict success. And you talked a little bit about this, right? There was a study at Florida State University where they looked at an employee's prior work experience, and then they compared it to their performance in a new organization. And they found no correlation between the two. Even people who had done the same type of work, tasks and roles into this new organization, there was no correlation between what they did. And then also as a
Yeah,
part of, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I was just going to say it ends up being, you can have all the credentials in the world, and we all know people. As I told you, I'm sort of a recovering academic, and so you can all think about college professors or people that
Yes,
you have come in contact with that are absolutely brilliant, like literally
yes.
IQ geniuses, Mensa members, and they couldn't work their way out of a cardboard box if their interpersonal skills or empathy depended on it. And so I think that's just reinforces your point, right?
Absolutely. And some MHS research actually shows that, for IQ, job success is between 1 and 20%, but with emotional intelligence assessments, it's from 27 to 45% job success rate. And that's powerful, and then of course the other piece is traditional interviews, they're poor predictors of um, performance for multiple reasons, right? We all know that, predicting the future is difficult. It's not easy. um, a large part of the reason is why we don't get married on the first date, Heather. right?
That's
You know,
right.
we take we take that time to really, get to know that person. It's the same thing with executives and their development as well too. So those are just some of the reasons why we really got into it. We understand that the just the deep impact of bringing individuals into our organization. And then also at the City of Savannah, which is so unique is when we make decisions about our executives coming to the organization, it's a family decision. Yeah, it's a family decision, and we realize that the decision needs to be driven by data. It's not a decision that's just made by one individual, but it's a collective decision that's, like I said, it's born on data itself. So,
That's great. That's great. Well, I noticed, I know because I'm sort of inside the space with you, but I've got these three key things here on this slide, and you've integrated emotional
yes.
intelligence into selection, which you've just talked about a little bit, but also onboarding and coaching and departmental leadership training, and
Mhm.
I think it'd be helpful to the audience to understand how
Absolutely.
you all have integrated into these spaces.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that we do, and I'll start at the executive level, and then I'll cascade to the onboarding and the departmental leadership. For our executives, we do what we call assessment centers, um, where our executives that are candidates for our positions actually go through uh, a presentation module, a coaching module, a collaborative meeting module, as well as a written exercise. We have role players that are part of these exercises. Some of these role players are actually from internal to the organization. Some of these role players are from across the country. We do it virtually. And as they go through this process, we take the time to identify what effective behaviors that they exemplify, and then what are those less effective behaviors. Once we, identify those, and then identify, obviously our top candidates, we look at their emotional intelligence assessments in which we provide to them prior to then, and we try to correlate between those behaviors that are exhibited through those assessment centers and the results of their EQI assessment. It's not utilized to, blanketly screen individuals out. It gives us a sense of, where they are with their emotional intelligence from a balance perspective. But then also, once again, it just provides us more data to make an informed decision about whether this individual is the best, fit for the city of Savannah itself. So
And
once
let me,
again, born. Go ahead. Yes.
no, no, I was just going to build on what you said for a minute
Sure.
because I think
Go
that
ahead.
the data piece is important, and the timing of when the EQ information gets shared with you following the skill simulations
Right.
allows you all to have more confidence in the validity of the process, because we know that all people who fill out these assessments are filling it out from their level of self-understanding, their level of self-awareness, their intentions. And while some people might be have intentions of socially desirable responses or not telling the truth, the majority of people who go through this process do have good intentions, but they may not have good self-awareness. And so the two pieces that you all have incorporated, I think, give you all more confidence in the data that you're getting because you have that juxtaposition, if you will.
Absolutely. And it's proven so much, to work, and as a part of that process, it's not only about the candidates that are selected, but we also sometimes have internal candidates that are may have been selected or not selected. And
Mm-hmm.
as a part of our follow-up piece to that process, which would be our onboarding, is we have our selected candidate or internal non-selected. We have them go through a process where they get feedback on their assessments. They get feedback on their, the emotional intelligence assessment. And then as well as they're given the opportunity to build out a professional development plan, which is surrounded, around the outcome of the assessment as well as their EQI assessment. So it's all about not just a selection piece, but also about the onboarding and the development piece of our selected candidates as well as our internal candidates as well too. So, and then departmental leadership, we've begun introducing emotional intelligence across the organization. Just did a training last week with all of our managers across the city of Savannah, and it's important to us because one thing that we recognize is that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, is if you can't see it, how can you manage it, right? If you don't have a high sense of self-awareness, then how can you manage that? And as a leader, it's important that we focus on increasing in our self-awareness so that we can be effective at managing what's in front of us as well as the team members that we're leading.
That's excellent, and it shows, I think, that it integrates from literally the starting place of when somebody enters the organization on through sort of a development, but then also ongoing continual learning. And I know that that's a key value of yours, Jeff.
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is some data that comes from another source, but I thought this would lead into some of the data questions that the audience might be interested in hearing from Jeff. And we've got some data specific to the city coming up in just a few moments. But I wondered if you wanted to speak to this learning culture data, because I feel like that was also something that sort of reinforced, particularly with those above you, that this was a worthy expenditure in the organization.
Yeah, and this source is LinkedIn, and ultimately what this is speaking to is when you invest in a learning culture, when you invest in the development of your team um, across your organization, the effect and the impact of that. Certainly, you'll see more promotions. Certainly, you'll see more internal mobility, but you'll also see retention. And that's just something that we've experienced at the City of Savannah. We've seen an increase in retention over the last 4 to 5 years of the organization. And we really attribute it to, bringing, the right leaders into the organization, providing opportunities for leaders that are already in the organization to develop in their emotional intelligence, and through these processes that that we're speaking of today. So you'll see here from 20. We're very, very proud of, and we continue to see that momentum today.
So retention is a very common metric that human resource departments are held to a standard, and I I know that that's one of the goals in the city, but I know that there are other organizational goals, and so I'm wondering if you could speak to how the assessments, in addition to retention, how
Mhm.
the assessments have assisted you in achieving the organizational goals, and maybe it's, you might want to speak to broader city goals, or you may want
Mhm.
to narrow that focus to the goals specific
Mhm.
to the things that are in your purview, in your scope.
Sure. I'm going to speak to one thing that really, I think, um, really speaks to your question, and it's, we took our CEO, our city manager now, through this process. Um, so we live our message at the City of Savannah when it comes to this process itself, and as a result of selecting our CEO through this process, utilizing emotional intelligence assessment centers, just in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen not only retention increase, we've seen tremendous continued transformation, but even more importantly, we're embarking on our first ever strategic plan. It's called GPS, strategic plan. It stands for Great Public Servants. If you Google GPS, City of Savannah, you'll be able to see a full page on that. And we really attribute that to who? It's a selection process. Everything begins with who who you bring into the organization. It's not the P&Ls, it's not the master plans, it's not the agreements. It's about the selection process and ensuring that you're bringing the right individuals into your organization to lead the organization. And our city manager is a product of that. And we could attribute a lot of our continued success right now to that process.
So that leads to a follow-up question, which is that you have talked about it, if you can't see it, how do you know it's there? And the other adage is, if you don't measure it, you don't get it, right? And so how are you measuring the effectiveness of your processes or the assessments in improving the performance of city executives and leaders?
One of the things, interestingly, we're actually, in seeking partnership with MHS Multi Health Systems, our sponsor today, who'll be partnering with us. We're actually doing a program evaluation, um, looking back 7 years on the data of the performance of this plan, and looking at each of the searches. We're looking at the data. We're looking at performance data. We're looking at the composites, which Heather spoke of earlier. Um, Correlation between the composites and the candidates as well too. And most importantly, as I noted, their performance within the organization. So currently, that is a program that's in process right now.
That's great. And that'll be interesting data, both for the city and I suspect MHS as well. So obviously implementing something, the emphasis is on selection, but you also have talked about onboarding, coaching, training, and you're looking at their performance both internally in the city, but now in an actual research study. What steps have you and your team undertaken to ensure that the assessments are being used fairly and ethically? I know that when it's just within the control of
Mhm.
HR, that's one way of handling it, and that's done at a high level. But when the data gets released, perhaps, you've got to ensure that other decision makers, other leaders who might get access to that information are using it fairly and ethically as well. So if you could talk to a little bit about how you're either training executives or supporting them through the decision-making process, I think that would be useful for the audience to hear.
Absolutely. Well, first off, when assessments are um, released or prior to being released, it has to be interpreted by an individual who's certified. I have individuals on my team who are certified, as well as we outsource some of that, where we have certified practitioners that will actually help to interpret the results. That's very, very important. Because once again, it's not about kind of a black and white, uh, you know, pass or fail. It's about balance. It's about identifying peaks and valleys in which these candidates have, um, to help us make a better decision. But if it's for training, it's for helping that individual further develop in those areas. So, um, and then the second, um, for hiring decisions, the data is validated and it's reliable for making hiring decisions. I know there's a lot of indexes and things of that nature out there, that may not be validated or reliable for making hiring decisions. The EQI 2.0, yeah, it is. And once again, as I said before, never make decisions in a vacuum by itself. This is a tool that should complement some form of assessment that provides you um, a list of behaviors in which these individuals are exhibiting, so that you can make those correlations between the assessment results. That's when it's most effective.
Okay. So,
Heather,
yes.
you had just asked that I gently interrupt if there was
Yes,
a question.
please.
So it's just a question, Jeff. Someone is very appreciative of the culture there. They're asking that if they can come work for you. So I just thought you'd appreciate that comment.
That's great. That's
Well, thank
wonderful.
you. Leave your email in the chat. No.
Keep your eye on job openings for the city of Savannah is what I would recommend. Thank you for
Yes,
bringing that
thank
to
you.
our attention. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think the audience would also like to hear, because I bet that because you've been successful doing it, I bet there are some people sitting there listening to you thinking, oh my gosh, this would be great in our organization. But it would be maybe an uphill effort to do that. And I
Yeah.
think it would be useful for the audience to hear about what challenges, if any, and if not challenges, maybe that's too strong a word, but maybe
Mhm.
what were some little speed bumps, or things
Sure.
that you had to, if you were advising our audience on what they needed to look out for, that we've talked about sort of the pros and the pluses and the roses, but if there were any thorns along the way that you had to navigate,
Mhm.
I think they might be happy to hear some of those.
Yeah, I think one of those, thank you, Heather, great question. I think one of those would be, really just providing education for our senior leaders in regards to the process. I think what occurred at times was, you know, uh, maybe senior leaders not understanding why we need to do this and the importance of it. But really, I think if I were to start it all over again, I'd start with kind of enterprise-wide kind of education and training on why we do it, and why it's so important, and the impact um, that it has. Now, I will say this: one of the things that's helped with that is allowing many of our senior leaders to participate in what we call our assessment centers. And they've been able to see the value not only of that process, but they've been able to see the value of the EQI assessment that we offer on the back end as well too. So that's created some sense of buy-in with our team. Um, and what goes along with that as well too, not only the education and training, but just the branding of the process itself, just
Mm-hmm.
really operationalizing it. It's really a process that it was born out of human resources. However, um, you know, it's important to get that buy-in, and we had to work through that with our executive officers as well as our city manager as well too. So.
So that's a great segue to the next question, which is the communication of purpose and benefits. So you've talked about that in terms of the executive decision-making group,
Mhm.
but I'm wondering about city employees. You've talked about sometimes there are internal candidates who go through the process, but they don't get the job. Um,
Mhm.
and and so somebody who's not applied yet for a job, but who's watching that person go through a
Mhm.
process and not get a job might be going, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about this. So what
Right.
steps, if any, are you all taking to communicate the purpose and benefits of this to the larger employee base? Because I may not
Mhm.
be up for the job that's being hired for right
Mhm.
now, but I might be two
Mhm.
years away from it. So how how
Mhm.
how are you all navigating that piece of it?
Well, when it comes to change management, you've got to take baby steps and quick wins. And one of the things that we've recently done and made a commitment to was starting to introduce, the concepts of emotional intelligence and the assessments and the process to our middle level managers. So we have close to, if not over 100 of those. And we had a leadership summit 2 weeks ago, and we introduced it to them, right? We introduced, just emotional intelligence itself, how it shapes, their leadership story, as well as the processes in which we have in place if they ever desire to be promoted within the organization. So that is our first step. That was our first step, just to really start introducing it through some of the vehicles that we have within the organization, and that was the one that we've done.
Okay. I see a question from Ms. Brooks, who's asking, how do you rebuild trust or EQ culture after a leadership or organizational shift? And you had such a shift, although you were at the beginning of building the EQ culture at that time. So I wonder if you
Mhm.
could speak to Ms. Brooks's question.
I mean, I think it starts with you're going through that shift, because and as Heather was saying, I did go through that shift. I had a new CEO and city manager in 2021, and prior to that, I think we went through two or three in such short periods of time. And I think the biggest piece was, sitting down with your CEO, sitting down with your city manager, whatever you're on government side or private, or your leadership. Maybe it's a sponsor, an executive sponsor, and sharing with them the value of the emotional intelligence assessment. Have them take it. Say, hey, I want to see if you'd like to try this out. And, I just got certified, or you may have somebody outsourcing it. Let them test it out, that senior leader or that sponsor, get their feedback, get their buy-in, and I think that's where you start right there. I could say, hey, put this whole big program together, but I'm saying really it just starts with that one individual that can be that champion for how valuable it could be for the organization.
That's great. And I know Jeff to be a very humble person, so he won't say this, but I will, which is that he was for a long time the sole ambassador of this in the city. And then one by one, as he just described, he started bringing in some partners who sort of bought into it with him. And so I think that I want to emphasize the point you made, Jeff, that having an ambassador for your initiative or an advocate for your initiative is crucially important. That somebody who is taking the emotional responsibility of making sure not every minute of every waking day, that's not possible, but that at key moments
Mhm.
that when a door opens, you walk through that door and you've got this front of brain and ready to go when the timing is right.
it,
Um, Go
and can
ahead,
I say something, Heather? To your
please.
point, you really struck something there, is because I want to make sure I'm being vulnerable here, is, you know, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, there were moments where you're in the middle of a process and you have an executive sponsor who is going through it, and they're saying, okay, remind me why we're doing this again. And
Yeah.
there's this re-education piece that you have to do. And then when you do that, it's like, oh, yes, you're right, Jeff. Okay, okay. That's why we're doing this. This is important. It's more data. So we can make a better informed decision, right? Outside of that, we would have just did a traditional interview, and we would have been using our gut, and we would have been, using our intuition, which is dangerous, but just as the only piece of data to make that decision. So it's not that one time you get them. It's kind of, it's this ongoing, educational piece, and getting them to buy in, re-buy in to that process.
And I think that rebuy-in, I just want to emphasize this because you and I had this conversation within the last month that
Yeah.
sometimes managers ignore the data that's in front of them for whatever
Mhm.
reason. They ignore the data, and usually it comes back to bite them somewhere in on their anatomy.
Mhm. It
Um,
does.
and so we were just talking about this in the last month when we started talking about the need to do the research and partnering, you all partnering with MHS to do the research so that you have more data to help convince and get more buy-in from these folks that look what happens when you didn't follow the breadcrumbs of data and you made a different decision. And what does that executive look like?
Mhm.
And you did follow the data and look at what that what the outcomes of that were. And so I think that re-education and recognizing that it's an ongoing process. It never ends. It absolutely never ends, because there's going to be turnover. And then, as you said, people forget because they, maybe it's been 2 years since they've done a hire and they sort of forgot the value of it. And this leads to sort of my last fixed question. And then there may be some
Okay.
other questions from the audience, which is that timeline, because you started there in the city in 2018 and you had already drunk the Kool-Aid before you arrived in the city.
That's right.
But the timeline from 2018 to 2025, and I'm not looking for detailed milestones here, but you've been working on and implementing this initiative sort of one bite at a time. And if you were advising the audience, what are some of the milestones you would tell them to be paying attention to, or the timeline with which they need to have a reasonable expectation? Because it didn't happen in a month. It didn't happen just because you had the idea, somebody immediately bought it. We've already
Right.
talked about those things. So
Right.
what do you think of the timeline for the audience might be in thinking about implementing initiatives like this? What milestones do they need to be paying attention of to track their progress?
Yeah, great question. And here's full disclosure. I didn't start this process right when I was appointed to the city of Savannah. I came in and really evaluated, how our processes worked in terms of bringing executives in. I allowed kind of the existing process to kind of play itself through, and then kind of do a little bit of a program evaluation. Uh, Full disclosure, it did take someone who may have been out of the organization more, but it did take maybe a misstep in hiring at a high level for me to realize we really needed to put this process in place to ensure success moving forward. So I'd say about 2 to 3 years in, we introduced the process to the city of Savannah, and I tested it out on our IT director position. I know that's a difficult position to find and fill, and I knew it'd be an easy buy-in to utilize the process with a position like that. Now, once we went through that process, I think what everyone saw was, wow, we just hired somebody that was really great, and they had a tremendous transformational impact on the organization. And so slowly after that, I started introducing it for a few more directors. So it wasn't like required or mandatory, but more higher level positions, such as our city manager, our CEO, and such as our police chief and fire chief. Um, and then I think along the way, individuals began to see the value and the success of that program, and it began to formalize and into our operations, especially when our city manager arrived in 2021. He went through the process, saw the value of the process, so he came out, into the organization already embracing it. So that really played a big part into that. So, and now we're, since 2021, now we're at a place where we really, as I mentioned earlier, is now it's more about let's do a program evaluation of this. We have a desire to see this program, stand the test of time beyond myself or whomever else is at the city. How can we make this a part of what the city does for years and decades to come? And that's why we're embarking on this program evaluation to kind of assess what are the gaps, what are the strengths of this program, how can we enhance this program, what data are we not collecting that we should be collecting, to to understand more of the impact that this program is having on the city. So first 2, 3 years in, that's kind of when we introduced it. We did a few major high level positions up until 2021, and then our city manager CEO was hired. After that, he really embraced it. He wanted to utilize the process for a few of his high ranking officials. He saw success, and that's what we continued to do it thereafter. And now we're in program evaluation mode, right? We want to evaluate the program to continue to start communicating it across the enterprise in the years to come. But it starts with that diagnostic assessment so that we can have a strong message to the organization of why we do it.
That's great. I have a question here from an audience member. Tom Horn asks, please describe the shift in culture over time as the EQI 2.0 was implemented.
I think, and I want to make sure I'm hitting on your question. I think I think the shift was just as we were bringing in new leaders, as we were bringing in new leaders through this process and utilizing, the EQI 2.0 with our executive leadership, our directors, our senior directors. I think that's where the shift really occurred as we introduced them into the organization. And let me be very clear, some of these individuals actually were promoted in the organization as well too. So it wasn't just coming into the organization. We promoted individuals that were, very, very high level of emotional intelligence within our organization to director and chief positions. But that's really where, looking from the balcony, that's where I've seen the shift, right? Is bringing those individuals into the organization or promoting them, and then seeing a change in how decisions are made, seeing a change in how stress management is handled across the organization, seeing a change in collaboration in terms of how interpersonal relationships are managed at the highest level, even down to the middle and down to our employees. You know, um, I think that's really where we've seen that shift, and we're seeing it this year as well too. So we have a few new individuals that are on our executive team that's joined us this year, and we're continuing to see that shift.
And I would add to that, based on my understanding and involvement in the process over the last few years, is that um, the city of Savannah, because you mentioned internal people that were promoted and
Sure.
external, and there are some employers who only want to hire external, and they don't really believe in the internal, and it could be for good reasons. Like maybe the internal people aren't ready. There's not been good succession planning. I'm
Mhm.
not criticizing it from that perspective, but there
Sure.
are some employers that really believe in external hiring and don't really do the internal. And then there are other employers who will hire the internal regardless of what the data says. They hire the internal, and
Mhm.
and that's their commitment is promotion, promotion, promotion. And that a lot of times happens in the public safety rules. But what's unique about the city of Savannah is that I would say, I don't know the data, but maybe it's not 50-50, but it's pretty robust that there are a lot of people who have been um, developed internally to be ready. And sometimes they miss the first time they try, and they get feedback and they do better the next time. And then there are people who've also come in from the outside. And so I think that also helps shift the culture, because then you've got people that are internal who are seeing the benefits, but then you have new
Mhm.
people coming in from the outside who also see the benefits. So it's sort of a combination shift in culture, if you will, because there are people who've been there 20 plus years who have recently been promoted, and now they have
Mhm.
a different understanding. That's not just the talking that
Mhm.
HR is giving them. They now personally have an understanding of it.
That's correct. That's correct. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but bringing in our CEO through that process really was a pivotal moment. Yeah,
Right.
it really was. Yeah,
Because he became the champion. You weren't alone the
he did.
champion. He
He
became the
did.
champion. Yeah.
He did.
So I know we're approaching the last sort of 5 minutes, and I want to make sure that anybody else who has questions, I want to invite you to ask those questions while you've got Jeff captive, which I have to tell you, I'm delighted, because I sometimes have to reach out multiple times because this man is so incredibly busy. So we're lucky that he was able, I'm sure he's a little jet lagged. So if there are other questions, I want to encourage you to please ask them now in either chat or the Q&A. So Jeff, while we're waiting to see if any questions materialize, are there any sort of last words of wisdom that you would like to share with these
Mhm.
folks. And I do see one question has come in, but
Mhm.
are there last words of wisdom that you want to share? And then I'll share the question that has come in.
You know, the hiring process is so important. It's 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 the beginning of all things with your organization. And anything I look at in our organization right now, whether a success, whether effective or ineffective, I can look back and say, how did we bring that position in here? What
Mhm.
was the process for that?
Mhm.
And so it's very important, that certainly, the EQI 2.0 assessment. I mean, it's not the only assessment out there, but it's a very valuable assessment, and I would encourage you to do some research, look it up, see how it could be of benefit to your organization. Um, start small. Start small. It doesn't have to just start small. It doesn't even have to be with a search, right? Start with, if seeing how one assessment might work on you. Start with you. Go through the process. Get coached on it. You know, um, Experience that. Start with your team. Once again, start with an executive sponsor. See how they respond to it. But you have to be bought into it first before other people buy into it. So I think that's going
So
to be very, very important. Yeah.
that's great. And the question that has come in actually relates a little bit to this slide that we've already covered.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
Dana Eckert, and I hope I pronounce that somewhere in the approximation of real, um, asks, what metrics did you use to show ROI on the program? And so I'm flipping to this slide because I think retention
Mhm.
is certainly one of them, but there may be others
Mhm.
that either you already know off the top of your head or this program evaluation will reveal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest piece, this is the biggest one right now, is we've looked at not only the organization from a retention perspective, but we've looked at retention in our service centers as well as in our particular departments, especially where individuals are brought in through this process, and that's where we've seen the most impact. And as Heather said, there's other data we want to look into in terms of return on investment. One is through our performance management process. We have not gotten to that yet, but that is our next step. And just to see how those individuals are rating from year to year. And then two, looking at the composites that are the strengths of those individuals, and seeing a correlation. Are we bringing in individuals that have similar themes and strengths within the emotional assessment? And if we are, then maybe those are things that we need to continue to look for as we bring individuals into the organization. So I hope that helps.
That's great. Well, I think we're at the near the end of our time, and I know that Rhonda has put up the evaluation form that she hopes each audience member participates in. And I just want to thank all of you who participated today on behalf of Jeff and myself for listening to us. And I love the opportunity to be able to showcase Jeff and the city of Savannah in terms of what they're doing, because the majority of our work is spent in the public sector and nonprofit sector. And I know that the for-profit sector does a lot of assessments and uses a lot of different approaches. But I think Jeff would agree with me, the public sector sometimes lags behind in some of those innovations. And the city of Savannah is not doing that. And I think it's important to lift them up for that reason. So we very much appreciate your attention today and your interest in this process. Jeff, are there any closing comments you'd like to make?
Heather, it's always been a pleasure. I just want to thank you for our partnership, and then I thank everybody for attending today, and thank you for the kind words. I see it coming up in the chat. I really appreciate that, and then also I want to appreciate the team from HR.com and allowing us the opportunity in the space to share this information across the United States, if not the world. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Rhonda, I'll flip it back to you.
Thank you, Heather. And echoing the comments in there as well. Just wonderful. Thank you so much to both you, Jeff, and to Heather. And I love to see that beautiful partnership. So thank you very much. And to everyone for participating, engaging, and for being here and learning, we thank you as well. If anyone would like to view this webcast again, it will be archived shortly on hr.com, and you can view that again at any time. The HRCI and SHRM credits, those will be in your hr.com account within 48 hours. And we will also send an email with your credit information. Please enjoy the rest of the event. To go to the next session, you would just head back to the webcast auditorium and click on attend to view the next button. But before you do that, again, I want to mention the exit survey. The link is in the chat area. However, it will open on a new tab on your computer once I close out this session. Your feedback is super important. So please just take a moment to fill that out. And again, thank you, Heather. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks to
Thank
MHS,
you.
and take great
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Thanks so much.